Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it's just because it's parliamentary recess next week, politics doesn't stop. Oh no, there are two by-elections round the corner, one in Copeland in the northwest of England, another in Stoke and Trent Central, where the former Shadow Education Secretary, Tristram Hunt, he vacated his seat to take up a role as director of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. But Labour is facing a fight to hold on to the constituency, as Adam Fleming reports.
Seconds away, UKIP's new leader has stepped into the ring as their candidate in a by-election bout to see who's the best champion of Brexit.
At the last election, UKIP came second to Labour here by about 5,000 votes. But now they're confident they can land a knockout blow because this place is packed with people that voted to leave the EU.
70% of people voted to leave the European Union. I'm the only candidate who's standing in this election, who's a true Brexiteer, who's always campaigned to leave the EU, and therefore I believe I would be the best person to represent their interests.
But he's had to fight off allegations he wasn't living in the constituency when he entered the contest.
Explain to me what's going on with this issue about your house.
Well, we took out the lease the day before nominations. Everything we've done is perfectly legal and within the law. It's a red herring, basically. The Labour Party are trying to get off the real issues in this election and focus on something which is banal nonsense. 2, 3, 4.
And there's been trouble as well for the Labour contender. He's been labelled a Remoaner after he sent a series of anti-Brexit tweets filled with words you wouldn't want them to hear.
Now, I can't believe I'm about to ask this question in a nursery on a Sunday morning TV programme, but did you really tweet that you think Brexit is a pile of
I tweeted many things about Brexit. That tweet's out there. It was done quite after the referendum result, and it was my way of showing my frustration at the fact that months after the result we hadn't had anything from the government. Theresa May had failed to produce any plan. She'd failed to give any meaningful statement about what Brexit meant other than bland statements about Brexit is Brexit and it's a hard Brexit, it's a soft Brexit. And, you know, I said what I said, but the context of it was out of frustration.
So you didn't mean to insult the 70% of the people who lived here who voted to leave?
I never mean to insult anybody, and you know, I've made it quite clear. If I'm elected as the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent Central, I will absolutely respect the wishes of the people of Stoke Central. I will make sure that my vote in Parliament is to trigger Article 50.
While the Tories man has done a little bit of rebranding too.
I voted Remain and I've been open about that, but my top priority is about the economy and ensuring that we still have an economic relationship with Europe. And, you know, Theresa May has set out a clear proposal to ensure that we develop a trade relationship with Europe and make that a success.
It means the Lib Dems and the Greens are the ones battling Brexit. Well, when the Lib Dem candidate is actually here.
Where is he?
Well, the candidate, he's a consultant cardiologist. He's actually at work today doing very important heart surgery. So he'll be back tomorrow, back on the campaign trail, working very hard. 30% of people voted to Remain and nobody else is representing them. So, you know, it's still a live issue. It's still something that people care about. We're only at the start of the Article 50 process and there's still a long way to go. And we're very clear that we are standing up for those who want to remain in the single market, who want to protect jobs and investment in this country.
Labour have taken people for granted in this area for a great many years. And UKIP, I'm afraid, all UKIP can offer the politics of division.
I'm not fit enough anymore.
I've covered a lot of by-elections where UKIP have come second. We'll find out if they've really got Labour on the ropes this time on February the 23rd.
Come on. Got a good job. Yeah,
And here's a full list of all the candidates standing in the Stoke-on-Trent Central by-election. As you can see, by-elections do attract lots of candidates. That's the full list there. You can also get that on the BBC website. Janet, I was trying to think back. Here we have the main opposition party defending 2 seats in by-elections in the mid-term of a government. And all the speculation is whether the opposition party can hold on to these 2 seats.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unprecedented, is it not?
I can't think of an equivalent. I mean, normally you wouldn't just expect them to win seats that they've held traditionally. You'd expect them to make inroads into seats held by the governing party. That's usually a metric of success for an opposition. And I do wonder whether, if they fail to hold on to even just one of these, whether it accelerates the momentum and the criticism of the leadership at the moment. But I do think they're sociologically quite interesting constituencies. I mean, Matthew Goodwin earlier was talking about the left-wing coalition over the years almost being too broad for its own good. It included places like Hampstead, Hackney, Primrose Hill, Holborn and St Pancras in London, big university towns, the middle of Manchester, middle of Bristol, socially liberal, quite diverse ethnically. And it included places like Stoke, which are much more conservative, bit less...
With a small c.
With a small c, culturally conservative. A lot less diverse, much less economically well off. Can the left hang on to both bits of the country, both bits of that electoral coalition? Recent evidence would suggest it cannot, and the opportunity for UKIP is to pick up the second of those 2 types of communities, the Stokes and the Copelands.
And that's what makes these by-elections interesting, I would suggest. It isn't just about Mr Corbyn's future, of which I think we hear far too much. It is more about this traditional Labour coalition. Can it still survive, particularly in places like Stoke?
Europe clearly is a test. I think it's a myth, by the way, that Labour are only split now over Europe, and it's always been a Tory problem. I mentioned it last time I was on. They were split when the UK joined the then common market.
They were indeed. They were split. That's why we had a referendum in 75.
And that was why they had a referendum then.
But the balance went the other way.
And then it went the other way, but they were in absolute chaos behind the scenes over what they thought about the euro in the run up to the 97 election. Skillful leadership can paper over the cracks. And to address the wider issue of whether we are now in an era where left-right issues have completely disappeared and there's more of a sort of regional divide. If you take Europe out of the equation, which you can't, but if you were able to, issues about health, transport, housing, I think actually do split more left-right than a regional divide. So I think there is still fundamental left-right issues, but Europe isn't one of them. And Europe has to be managed by a Labour leader skillfully, and evidently that hasn't happened now.
How would you see these by-elections in the current political context?
Well, as you say, Labour should be walking these by-elections, no question at all. There should be a sign of the march of the Labour Party taking on the current Conservative government. But actually, I don't think that they do raise any questions about Corbyn's leadership, because the people who put Corbyn in don't apparently think that winning elections matters. It doesn't. You've got to remember, this will be the mainstream media. It'll be our fault why any of those Labour candidates don't win. I mean, the thing I think is most interesting is whether or not there is a role for UKIP, because the argument after the referendum was, well, you know, UKIP's done its job, it got us the referendum, move on, nothing to see here. But I remember speaking to Paul Nuttall when he was, before he was UKIP leader, sorry, Freudian slip there, before he was UKIP leader, on the day after the battle, and he said, this is year zero, this is where UKIP starts now. And this is the interesting thing, do we actually see this one particular party actually having a role in the future? And I think it's all to play for, because they could not have not stood in this seat, and they did it, and they have to win it to still be an electoral force.
The Labour candidate in Copeland has made the NHS the issue for her in this, and that goes into the left-right, are we spending enough or are we not? So that will be a test of what you were saying, to see if traditional left-right issues, which at the moment would play Labour's way, I would suggest, are big enough to overcome all the things that you've been talking about and Matthew Goodwin's been talking about.
Absolutely. And maybe at this particular junction, they're not. But I don't think any of those issues will go away. And that's why I question whether we're seeing the end of a kind of historic left-right divide. But at the moment, with Europe so prominent, clearly these by-elections are unusual. And they will be a test of leadership for Theresa May in the coming months, if not at the moment, as they have been in a way that he hasn't risen to for the Labour leader.
I've been getting